I'm Clyde Lewis, and this is Ground Zero. For those of you who just tuned in, we have a problem going on again in Burns, Oregon, and we are monitoring the situation right now. The FBI are showing up for the 4 remaining occupiers there. And I've been listening to the live feed. There's a live feed right now, and we've been listening to it. We're running a record on it as well. And these guys, they say that they're not being taken from that land. They're going to stay there, and they'll have to be killed or something. They are saying this. They are. It's just. I don't know how this has happened. It's gotten so out of hand. But there's a congresswoman on the line who's en route to the refuge. She told them, she says, they're not going to kill you before I show up. And they don't believe that because they have what they say is helicopters and FBI agents within 50 feet of them. Now, as I have said, and I have said many times on this program, no, it's not 50 feet, 50 yards rather. As I have said, I am. I don't like to jump onto things unless I have something definitive going on. We don't have the names of the congresswoman yet. We're listening to the feed. Okay, there's this feed going on, and all we can figure out is that there are several people that are en route to the refuge, and we have a live stream right now, and they're calling for Americans now to show up at the refuge for support. And the FBI is waiting for a few key people to show up, and they're getting ready to cut their cell phone. And there are a number of people right. There's about 57,000 people right now that are hearing the exchange. In fact, our newsroom is listening to the exchange. Sandy, one of the occupiers, she's a female occupier there. She says they're going to kill us. They're going to kill us. And then another guy says these are evil people. The FBI. Then commenting about how they have weapons and they will use them. The FBI will not allow the congresswoman on the refuge, and they want them to be peacefully taken into custody, but now we're looking at a possible Waco situation going on here, and they feel like they've been ignored by the militia. They're being ignored by the patriots. Let's see, Sean Anderson's one of the occupiers. And every time they want to take a break from talking to these authorities, they talk about reading from the Bible, the Psalms, or they're praying, or they're doing something. And so this is most certainly a difficult situation because this has happened so quickly that, as I've had happen before, that when we're preparing a radio show, if something goes down, and we do have the ability to perhaps cut away and talk about this, but all we can do is talk about it. Now, we could play the feed. Here's another thing it's so difficult. We can play the feed, but the problem with that is that it's uncensored. And so we're hearing swearing, we're hearing cursing, we're hearing all this. One of the guys that was on the phone was saying, remember in Braveheart, he stood his ground and he died for what he believed in and all these things. So as we're reporting tonight, 4 remaining militants right now, 4 remaining, they're militants now because they're threatening. It's just a difficult thing. There are 4 remaining people occupying the refuge right now in the Malheur Wildlife Refuge in Burns, Oregon. They're on a live stream. They're saying they're under siege by the FBI. And then we're hearing static. It's abruptly shutting down. Things are not perfect right now. So until we find ourselves on an even footing and give information that will not be erroneous, we're going to go back to what we were talking about earlier. And then if we do find someone who can get us some information about this, we will break away and get that information to you. We have done this before. It's a lot more difficult to do this, but we can somehow put together some information for you and give you something to think about if you're interested in hearing about this. A lot of people have been emailing me. A lot of people have been sending me Twitters and all kinds of things saying, Clyde, it's irresponsible of you not talking about this. It's not irresponsible of me. I'm doing the responsible thing by waiting and seeing if I can find out any more information before I give you any wrong information. So that's how it works. We're working on this right now. 888-6, go to Daniel Louis Crumpton, who was on the show with us when we were talking about the situation as it unfolded there before when Lavoy Finicum, the live feed's been cut as well. So we have no access to the live feed. Daniel, you're on the air with us. Go ahead.
Hey, Clyde, how are you doing? Thanks for having me on.
It's very harried here. A lot of craziness happening. We just lost the live feed, and the guy who was reporting with our eyes on the ground just lost his cell phone connection. So they're getting ready to cut off the telephones. We can't get any information out of the compound. In fact, all my staff are throwing their hands in the air. Daniel, what kind of insight can you give us as to what is happening here?
Well, Clyde, I'm all the way in Georgia, so I know about as much as you guys do by listening to the live feed. I can give you my perspective and my opinion in a nutshell, is that this is a very impressive sequel to The Truman Show. And I know that may not make me popular, but what I've seen from the beginning of this to the end of this is that at any point the FBI could have cut internet access to anyone who was live streaming. And at the moment that they choose to do it, which I believe it's still streaming now if you're on YouTube, it is very suspect to me. Like the caller that just said, it's a lot of military for 4 people who are left at a bird refuge. So it seems to me that there's something bigger going on. If the FBI wanted these people dead, they would already be dead, and we'd be hearing about them being dead on the news and not listening to a live stream of this, in my opinion, is a melodrama that is doing great damage to what liberty activists, patriots in the patriot movement, and people in the militia movement have been working and pushing so hard for so many years. I'm an activist, and I've done a lot of activism. I love this country and the Constitution just as much as anyone else. But from the beginning of this entire ordeal, I had a bad feeling about it, and I've become more and more vocal about it. And now that we're seeing what we're seeing going on now I'm actually upset.
Well, I mean, but you heard, there was a while there where I was talking with people like Stuart Rhodes, Chris McIntyre from Idaho 3%, and they're saying no more free Wacos, which means that if anything, you're saying this is bad for the movement, and it may be bad for the movement. But see, what we have is we have a group of individuals that feel like that what they're doing is right, and if they end up getting shot and killed, they'll have nobody to back them up, nobody to say, hey, we're here, we're supporting you, we want you out of there peacefully. I think that if anybody else was there, they could talk them out of it. It would be someone who they consider to be an equal, not the FBI.
Right. Well, my question would be this, Clyde, is whenever the Bundys and the original members took over the refuge and made the claim that they were going to stay there and die, and then it's very unfortunate that Lavoy Finicum lost his life. I believe that the man did what he did out of the passion of his heart. And it's very unfortunate that he died. Mm-hmm. And I hate that he died. We can't take that back. But what we saw was all of these men who took that refuge over to begin with that said they were going to stay there and die. They scattered and left 4 people there. When the entire 3 weeks when they were begging for other militia to come and support them, where was all those militia members? Well, half of them that I can tell didn't even support this from the get-go. So I don't think this is another Waco. Even if people do die, which if I had to project and pray, I hope nobody dies. I think they're just probably going to either find a non-lethal way to deal with these guys or wait them out. But my intuition says it ends tonight.
Well, it will end tonight. They just cut the cell phone service, and they've cut all the information we can get from it. We can't get the feed anymore. We can't get anything. So usually that means if communications are being shut down, then they're about ready to make their move.
Well, that may be so. But we who are in the Patriot movement or the Liberty movement have to look at this objectively. We have to look at this. We can't do what we accuse most people who only pay attention to the mainstream media of doing and not connecting issues. Even if there is blood at the end of the night, we have to understand the events that led up to that blood, and then we have to ask if it was justifiable or not. And the very taking of that refuge by those men, from my perspective and from the perspective of the law, was unjustified, even from a constitutional point of view.
We'll go to Daniel in just a minute. We got some other people who want to weigh on this. John Carmen, former Secret Service, is also on the line to tell us what may be happening from his perspective as far as the law is concerned. We're keeping you updated on what's happening right now in Burns, Oregon. 4 occupiers remain there who didn't leave after Ammon Bundy told them to leave. Now the FBI is there. They just cut off cell phone service and our feed. So those who have cell phones around the area have not been able to get in touch with us. So now we're flying blind. 888. Daniel, what are you hearing here? What is it that, this sounds like that they've been caught up in the moment so much that now they have nothing more to do than just, it sounds like this has just gotten into some sort of psychotic, hysterical type of event now. It's almost as if, like, they say, we will go peacefully if you don't put us in jail. They're going to go to jail. And if they end up going to jail, they'll end up either killing themselves or they will be killed by the FBI. What do you think is going to happen?
Neither one. And when you first had me come on, I compared this to the Truman Show. And when they cut the feed just a minute ago before you went to break, everybody panicked. And it reminded me so much of the Truman Show whenever they had to cut the feed when Truman was trying to go on vacation. And it seemed like excessive force. So many cars were trying to stop this one person. But it was all for a show. Now, while you were at break, the feed came back on. I got it in the ear now. And the person who's on the line talking to the 4 people says, we need to pray. And they did a little prayer and said, well, you're probably running real low on rations. You probably need a steak right now. And the female that's there, I don't know her name, she said, well, oh, no, actually, we have plenty of steaks and pork, and we actually had some fried rice just a while ago. And she was very calm. So I'm not quite sure. I think that maybe the caller that you had on that your eyes on the ground is just really into this Truman Show. But that is we've been monitoring it.
We've been monitoring it the whole time, Daniel, and they have their moments of calm and they have their moments of hysterics. So it certainly isn't a Truman Show. I can see it as there's mental hysterics going on, and they happen off and on because they get caught up in their own ideas and their own delusions of grandeur, and they start talking about how they're going to die. Don't kill us. All this, I don't know what you mean by Truman Show.
Well, it's not the show for them. It's the show for all of us at home.
Well, that's not the point of this. And if you think I'm exploiting it, then I'll just stop doing this.
Oh, no, I'm not referring to you. I'm talking about the people who are saying there's going to be a civil war.
Well, many people believe there's going to be a civil war. It's just that's the way they're thinking, and that's the bad thing is that things like this do trigger things. Like I say, this is not a Lexington or Concord. This is not a Fort Sumter, but it's going to be something a lot worse, and that is a lot of people going absolutely crazy because of what is happening here. Daniel Louis Crumpton with us tonight on Ground Zero. 888-673-3700. It's 888-673-3700. We'll be back. I'm Clyde Lewis. You're listening to Ground Zero. We're updating you on what's going on in Burns, Oregon. My guest tonight is Daniel Louis Crumpton, who is giving commentary as well. We're going to go to Paul. Actually, let's go to Jay. Actually, that's not Jay. Hold on one moment. Let's go to Jay in Oregon. Hi, Jay. You're on Ground Zero.
Hey there, Clyde. Wow. I would like to bless the microphone in the name of St. Clyde, Pope of Discordia. Huh. If you don't mind.
Thank you, Jay. What's going on? What's on your mind?
This is a really, really serious situation, and this is right now the time to think about your initial topic there that you were talking about. It seemed like what you were getting at was there was a global situation of mass depopulation that we're looking at, and how are we going to deal with this? Is that as good as it gets? What are we going to do about it? And now we're looking at exactly the same thing in a microcosm in our own country here. These people are facing this situation, and it looks very hopeless. We all look very hopeless right now, and it's generating an excessive amount of rage that blinds people from being able to act rationally and effectively. And, of course, if anybody's been listening to your show, we all know that is exactly the plan.
Well, Jay, hold on a second. Daniel, Jay's got a point. People who have lack of hope and lack of, they have a lack of feeling as though that anything they do matters. And I'm hearing that a lot in the voices that are being shouted on. The voices that are shouting out that they have no hope, that they don't feel like they're supported, that They feel like they're slaves. They feel like they're a product of their own normalcy bias. And I would say that, whether they're patriots or not is anybody's guess, and it depends on how their normalcy bias definitely identifies this. But what I'm hearing is a lot what Jay's saying. Lack of hope, lack of, they're desperate. These are things that are happening that most certainly should be looked at, not just the fact that they think they're patriots, but look at the fact that they are having this type of meltdown. Stand by, Jay. I want to hear Daniel's opinion in this.
Sure. Please.
I absolutely agree. And if it came across like I was saying you were exploiting the situation, no, not at all. What I'm saying is that this is like a Truman Show, but it's the FBI that's running the show. And the purpose of it, like I said, is that I am a patriot as well, and I support the militia as well. But this, from the beginning, has been very carefully orchestrated to send division through the patriot movement and the liberty movement. Yes, our civil liberties are being stripped away every single day. Yes, if there is bloodshed tonight, there is going to be conflict tomorrow. Absolutely. There is no doubt about that.
Sure.
But I'm one of the type of people who have always said that we can restore the republic in a peaceful way. Now, this situation is hell-bent on causing a hot revolution. And that is exactly what the FBI have wanted the minute that the Bundys and everyone who, though they were patriots, followed those men. And I'm not saying that those men were being led by the FBI.
Sure.
But let's give the FBI some credit. They're not dumb. They're not dumb. You don't leave a wildlife refuge under BLM control unlocked, unmanned, with the keys on the table for a militia to just waltz right in and take it over, and then expect to believe.
What you're hinting at is that this was probably, they did this on purpose. They lured the rats into the cheese. The rats took the bait. And then at the end, when they said they were armed and that they were going to do something, at the end, they didn't do anything. They were sitting ducks. And that's the thing that really people are forgetting is all they heard from the media is these men came in with loaded guns, ready for bear, ready to kill anybody who came near them, when in reality that wasn't the case. They came with their guns, and they... okay. They just got word that they say they will surrender tomorrow, but we'll see what happens. But the thing is that, and then at the end of it all, we see that they were fired upon, the vehicles fired upon. They were going to go meet with the sheriff to bring it to a conclusion. They were fired upon as they were going there, the roadblock, and then, of course, Lavoy Finicum being shot. And everybody who follow the mainstream narrative are saying, well, he reached for a gun. Well, his gun wasn't even on him. And as you look at the enhanced footage, as they did closer, you'll see that they had those laser pointers on his head, that he was shot several times, that he did reach for a gun. He was reaching to his chest and his body because he was in pain. And people will let their hate get in the way. And as I said before, people embrace the police state only if the police state eliminates that which they don't like. And that's the situation with this Ammon Bundy thing. You may not like Ammon Bundy. You may not like what he stands for, but he did believe that what he was doing was just, and he was a person who felt as though that lands were being taken and all that. But here's the deal. He didn't, Lavoy Finicum didn't deserve to die that way. And they didn't shoot back, nor when they had the opportunity did they fire the first shot. Their shots were all fired from the FBI. And that's what people forget, is they didn't pull a gun on anybody. They didn't start the firing first. The FBI shot first, and they tried to flee being shot, and then Lavoy gets shot anyway.
Right, but we got to keep in mind, we can't isolate on that this was all about Lavoy Finicum getting shot. We have to be able to, as objective observers, we have to look at the entire situation all interconnected.
I will say it was an ill-conceived plan, no doubt about that. Mm-hmm. It was an ill-conceived plan, and that's one of the reasons why in the beginning I was talking with Stuart Rhodes and Chris McIntyre, yourself, Chuck Ocelli, and others, and we came to the conclusion it was ill-conceived. But the outcome was something that was unfortunate. It was expected. We expected more dead, not just one, but then the one man that did die probably didn't have to.
More with Clyde Lewis and Ground Zero on FM News 101.
Tonight, I am announcing that the American government is over.
People are afraid.
This is not a time to stand down. It is a time to stand up.
It's sort of frightening when there's people making threats and people touting guns.
These people are
wearing fatigues and openly carrying rifles and stuff like that.
The ranch is adjacent to the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge and to have private property up on the Steen Mountains. They have refused for nearly 40 years to sell their ranch. And there have been very vindictive behaviors because they refuse. There have been intimidations, and the list goes on.
I am 100% willing to lay my life down to fight against tyranny in this country.
And we have tried the prudent methods to get government to at least look at this and say, hey, there's something wrong here. The rest of America can see that there's something wrong.
And you need to understand that we have no intent of pointing a gun at anybody. But let's be clear here. Who's pointed guns at me? Who's pointed guns at Ammon? They have. Who said that we will shoot you? We never have. They have. When we stood there at Bundy's, they were pointing guns at us and saying that they shoot us. We have no intent of doing that.
I'm going to jail for 5 years for 127. Seems like a bit of an overkill. It's not about me. It's about America. And somehow we got to get the wheels back on this wagon because they're flying off.
Gentlemen, we have called you together to inform you that we are going to overthrow the United States government.
I'm Clyde Lewis. You're listening to Ground Zero. The numbers to call tonight, 888-673-3700. That's 888-673-3700. Oh, my gosh. It's just been a crazy night. Here's what we just got sent to us. Listen to this.
We're not surrendering. We're just turning ourselves in.
No. What did I say? We've got a new battleground.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
New battleground. So,
but
let's just...
I want you to know that it's taking... It's going against everything we believe in, but we're going to do it. And we're going to leave our weapons, our personal weapons, in our own personal vehicles. We're going to leave them unlocked and leave the keys on the seat because they got to go through that and inventory everything. I don't know if we'll ever get them back, but, you know, we have our own vehicles here, so we have our possessions in there.
Okay.
And then we're going to walk one after another with the flag and turn ourselves in and meet you and Reverend Graham at the checkpoint.
Okay.
Franklin Graham, of course, the son of Billy Graham, will be there to negotiate. Cliven Bundy was supposed to be coming to Portland, actually, to see his son Ammon Bundy at the Multnomah County Jail, which is just across the street from this radio station, as a matter of fact, where we're broadcasting from. Daniel Louis Crumpton here on Ground Zero tonight. We're going to go to a few calls because a lot of people have been waiting to talk. We'll go to Johnny first in Idaho. Hi, Johnny. You're on Ground Zero.
Hey, how you doing tonight, Clive?
Oh, I'm just going crazy. But what's up with you?
I'm just trying to figure it all out. I'm kind of confused just because of the fact that it's like, well, if I walk onto somebody's property and they say you have to leave, then I have to leave. But if I don't leave, then I have to face ramifications. And so in this aspect, it to me seems like people are stuck in the ramifications and they are not accepting it. You know, and I totally understand that we all have the right to do what we have to do, but it seems to me like it's taken over the line.
On whose side? The side of those who are occupying, you think?
Yeah, I think so. Unfortunately, you know,
you do know that the land. You do know the land used to belong to the Hammonds, or it was the Hammonds. The Hammonds were taken to jail, and then, of course, we had Ammon Bundy come in and say that they were going to refuse because the BLM and the government wanted the land, and of course, the Northern Paiute Indians were saying that it was their land, and it was a big fight over land, and that's what this turned out to be. It went from a fight over land and protest for two men that went to jail to, patriot wars and death of a very good man, Lavoy Finicum, and just a number of things that went wrong. And as I said when I did my show a while back, I said that it was ill-conceived, and then I was called an armchair warrior for saying that, but I said, well, you look at how it's done. What was the goal? What was supposed to happen here? And then I think when they found out that they had exhausted all of their negotiations, they decided they wanted to talk with the sheriff. By that time, it was too late. By that time, shots were fired and a man was killed. And, of course, the rest were sent to jail. So, but none of them were tried as none of them were tried as terrorists. I just want to make that clear. None of them are being charged with terrorism, although the media charged them with terrorism, which is irresponsible. Right. And this is something that I think we need to understand. This is a perfect example of how the mainstream media gave a death sentence to a group of individuals who thought that what they were doing was righteous and correct. It may not be in the eyes of the law. It may not be in the eyes of the observers. But they went in doing what they thought was right, and the media said that they were terrorists. We don't say that about other people who decide to burn their cities down or anything else like that. We call a bunch of cowboys and ranchers terrorists, which I find a double standard in the media.
Right. Well, I like the Alcatraz thing. You know what I mean? I mean, when the Indians took over Alcatraz again, it was all of a sudden, oh, they're bad people and they need to get off the island. Well, no, they weren't. That was their land. I mean, we took that over. So they got kicked off the land, and fortunately, nobody died from it, but it's kind of the same thing in my eyes.
Well, and the people, the bad guys, or whatever the media tells you the bad guys are.
Right.
And that's what why I don't like about this story. Well, that's what I don't like about this story is that I believe that it was definitely a death sentence provided by the media, and a group of individuals that are uninformed about this are basically wringing their hands and are saying kill. In fact, I have a guy right now who's on Twitter who's basically saying, hey, if anybody from the FBI kills these people, come on Clyde's show and tell us all. Or, sorry about your dog, but we're not sorry for you. And kind of stuff like this, which is, come on. I mean, what's that? It is pathetic. And that's one of the reasons why this story has to be torn, is because it shows what people can do when they're standing up for something, and it shows how ugly people can get when it comes to this sort of thing. That human life has no value at all in a lot of people's eyes, because they don't like people. If they don't like those people, they'll embrace the police state to come in and kill those people. And this is what makes me ill. This is how America is now.
Yes.
And it's just horrible to think about it. Johnny, thank you. That's the thing, Daniel, regardless of Truman Show or not. I'm so fed up with people who will most certainly want the police to come in and kill somebody if they don't agree with them politically. And this is what we're getting in America right now, is we're getting a group of individuals, hysterical people like what we're hearing at the compound or at the refugee area, or the refuge area. And what we're hearing is these hysterical people, these psychotic people who may need a lot of mental health issues that are going on. They have mental health issues that need to be looked at. And yet, they're mentally ill, they're angry, they haven't killed anybody, but yet they deserve to die. We need to go in and kill them all. I mean, this is the type of mentality that I think America's done. Put a fork in this, we're over. That's how I see it.
Your caller said something that was absolutely perfect, and that it was he was confused. And I was on the Ocelli Effect before I came on your show, and one of the things that we mentioned was, at this point, they're going to stand down. So the ramifications of this entire event are going to be one of two things. When the next legitimate issue pops up where someone's rights are being threatened, a good bit of people are going to say, this is another Oregon thing, and not show up when needed. Or it's going to be another fluke issue, and too many people are going to show up and incite violence. But I think that the key thing to understand, especially with this Oregon thing, is did they know that they were doing something right? Well, listen, in 2014, some of the main characters of this ordeal made it absolutely clear that the Bureau of Land Management is a privately owned company. Well, you can't say that in 2014 and then come to Oregon in 2016 and then use Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 and say that this land is owned by the BLM, which is the federal government, and they can't do that. No. In 2014, you said the BLM is a privately owned company. So you have willfulness from the court's point of view that they failed to perform a moral and known duty. And I'm talking about the leaders of this Oregon standoff are on film stating that they knew the BLM was a privately owned corporation. So it's like justifying me going over into a Coca-Cola bottling facility because I don't like the chemicals that they put in their soda, and then taking over the factory and using their equipment to trash their stuff, and then holding up the Constitution and say, this is why I'm doing it, as if just holding up a Constitution is going to justify me taking over that bottling facility. But that's how this started.
Let's go to Richard in Texas. Richard, hi, you're on ground zero. Go ahead, Richard.
Clyde. Lived in Oregon from 98 to 2014. Know the agribusiness and agriculture very well there. This started way a long time ago. Started when they wanted to run all the mom and pop sawmills out. So they had contrived the spotted owl. Now you don't have it. A handful of those sawmills left. Then they went to the Klamath Lake and said the suckerfish was endangered, and they shut the water off to all the land in the Klamath area to dry up the agriculture, to let it go back. It's just, I think that the people there in the agribusiness community have had enough. Maybe maybe the way they've gone about it isn't right, or you may not agree with it, but nobody certainly deserves to die over it.
I agree.
And do we need to have all of those helicopters and all of the firepower for 4 individuals?
No.
And I don't blame them for wanting to wait till daylight, so that people can see clearly that they're coming out with their hands up and they don't get gunned down. But you gotta sympathize with them. They've had enough in that area in Oregon, stealing their land and their businesses, because the BLM or the or other federal government agencies deem that to be true. Just in closing, I had a friend that lived in Bonanza. Talked to him myself a number of years ago. They came in and shut wells down on farmers that were irrigating 400 or 500 acres of alfalfa, and the wells had been there for years and years and years, and said, well, you're pulling from the aquifer out of this river, and the river's 18 miles away. And they said, well, how do you know that? And they said, well, we're assuming that, and you have to prove that it's not. It laid the burden on the farmer.
Well, they're moving into Texas now, so be ready for hearing more of this going on in places like Texas and other places, too.
Yeah, well, I think they'll find more than 4 people that'll stand there shoulder to shoulder in Texas. So let them come.
Richard, thank you for the call. Thank you so much for the call.
Thank you.
You bet. 888-673-3700. That's 888-673-3700. We're going to take a break now because we're going to try and put together a few things behind the scenes here so that we can continue the continuity of this program. Tonight, we started the program off talking about something totally different, and we started realizing that something was going on in Burns, Oregon. Again, 4 occupiers, ones who wouldn't leave the compound after Ammon Bundy told them to leave, remain, and the FBI is there now, of course, with a number of helicopters and some MRAP vehicles, armored vehicles, and we're hearing from people there that are observing this, what is going on. We've been playing phone conversations from a live feed that was on the internet where we could hear the phone negotiations going on, and playing bits and pieces of that, trying to edit out the cursing and the swearing and the other problems we were having with it. But in the meantime, we tried to get you as much information as we can. We're going to continue. If you call us tonight, 888-673-3700, we'll continue this as long as it warrants. Daniel Louis Crumpton, my guest tonight on Ground Zero. And, of course, this is something that is definitely a tragedy. Mainly because of the fact that we have people who believe what they're doing is correct and right under the law. They are a product of their own environment. They have they believe that they're going to take their guns. They believe they're going to do a number of things. And now they said they were willing to die, but they are now saying that when daylight happens, they will surrender. They want to negotiate themselves out. They want to meet Franklin Graham to negotiate, and a few others too. As we're reporting on the standoff, the 4 remaining members at the refuge in Burns, Oregon. You heard the negotiation process happening right here, and we've had commentary from my guest tonight. Of course, Daniel Louis Crumpton with us tonight, and most definitely has some opinions, so we've been hearing from him tonight, and we're glad to have him on board with us to give his, it's a rather objective and somewhat controversial opinion about this. Now, Daniel, give us some of your background and why you speak the way you speak. Daniel, you there? Hold on, we got to get the phones working. Go ahead, Daniel.
I'm sorry, you kind of went out there for a second on me there, Clyde.
There you go. Yeah, go right. All I asked was I asked you, tell us about your background a little bit, so we can have your statements and we can qualify those statements to your background.
Oh, sure. Well, first and foremost, I'm an author. I'm the author of the novel "Then Came the Flood," which is on Amazon.com and Barnes and Nobles and all your retailers, which has absolutely nothing to do with politics, but I do urge people to check it out. But I became politically active in 2008, and with a group of other liberty activists in my area, which is the 8th Congressional District of Georgia, we started a website called theninthecar.com, which was a mixture of what I believe the Founding Fathers had an inkling about, which is a mixture of politics and spirituality, that you had to have an enlightened generation to really establish a firm republic, and that enlightened generation that mixes spirituality with politics has to be maintained in order to keep a republic, as Benjamin Franklin told us. So I've been writing about philosophy and politics and activism. I've been an activist myself. I've been to many rallies with the militia by my side at the Federal Reserve in Atlanta, at the Capitol building, things of that nature. I know a lot of the guys, who were out in Oregon, who were personal friends of mine, are personal friends of mine, and they believe deeply in the principles of the Constitution. And there's not a doubt in my mind that I understand completely, because I've been to jail several times as an activist for using my First Amendment, on frivolous charges. I've been abused by the system. I understand that we've been pushed to a point to where, as Jason Patrick would say, at some point you pick a hill that you want to die on, as far as how far you're willing to go to have your civil liberties stripped from you. But I'm a more Gandhi, John Lennon type of activist. I believe in the Second Amendment, but the only time that I would use it is in self-defense. But I've been an activist since 2008, and one of the reasons this is something that's very close to me is 5 years ago this week, my father, who was a veteran of 2 foreign wars, he was 72 shortly before he passed, and he didn't have too awful much to look forward to until Ron Paul came along and reinvigorated in this country the concept of the 10 Amendments of the Constitution. And it inspired him so much that I saw this old man who suffered from arthritis grab a stack of Ron Paul flyers and his cane and go down to the Air Force Base and try to educate younger people, because he had fought in 2 foreign wars, and at this age in his life, he knew that he had been lied to by his government, that Korea was a fluke and Vietnam was a fluke, and he wanted to make a difference while he still could to reverse the damage of his generation blindly following orders from a corrupt federal government. And that set an example for me that even somebody with a cane can make a difference by trying to repeat what the Founding Fathers did, which is set brush fires in the minds of men. And I believe that peaceful revolution is possible, and I think that it has to be the way this time around. We can't have a hot revolution. And that's why I'm so concerned and so impassioned about this Oregon incident, because now that and thankfully, no one else is going to get killed. Let's keep our fingers crossed till morning. But this entire situation has set back work like my father, myself, and a lot of patriots that I know have been really pushing for, since, longer than 2008, but, I jumped in then, but it's set us back a great deal.
I know there are a number of people, though, Daniel, that don't agree with you. I've had them tell me that. What do you say to them that don't agree with you? They're saying that there's got to be a moment in time where we do stand up and we do say no more. What do you say to that?
I say, come, let us reason together. Let us talk about it reasonably, because if you can come up with a solution, or maybe we can come to a solution together. But if they say that there is a point to where we're going to have to fight back, when that day comes, I'm going to defend my family. I'm going to defend myself. But I just am of the hope that we can find a way to do it peacefully before it comes to that. And I think that the FBI, and when I mentioned that this is like the Truman Show, I firmly believe that the FBI looked at the situation in Nevada in 2014 where the BLM got a black eye because it the militia won. They won that fight. And they had time enough to sit and think how that they could take the ball back to their, side of the field or the court. I don't know. I'm not a sports guy. Mm-hmm. And when this situation began, it became a honeypot for the FBI, and it worked like a charm. And I've talked to several veterans, today who said, I'm not for the encroachment of the federal government, but well played, FBI. They did a hell of a job. And what's sad about it is that I believe Lavoy Finicum was doing what he was doing, much like my father. But now it's going to end with the face of David Fry. And I don't believe that David Fry wanted anything other than to have his face in front of a camera for about 15 minutes. And that's what people are going to remember. They're going to remember David Fry at the end acting like Steve Buscemi from Armageddon and putting a black eye on everybody who went there with good intentions. Sure, there was wrong done by the federal government, but there was wrong done by the militia. And like my dad used to say, two rights will never make a wrong.
Right.
And, that's just my position. But, if it ever comes to a hot revolution, fight. Stand your ground. Defend your family.
Well, always the question arises, and I think it's a fair question to ask, and that is, when is it time? I mean, when do we endure the pain for a long time? When do we stand up and say, okay, it is time? Who's going to give the okay? I mean, that's the whole point. Is there some organized okay that you're supposed to receive before you move, or what exactly is the time?
I'm glad that you asked that question, and because it brings a concern that I have about this current revolution. We are in a revolution. When 1776 came around, it was about brush fires in the minds of men, winning the hearts and minds. And involved were, yes, men who were willing to pull a trigger. Yes, that was absolutely key. But it was also writers, philosophers, and men of spiritual faith that were involved that were really the ones who were probing this. Me, as a philosopher, as a writer, as a very spiritual person, I can tell you, Clyde, that the guys who are willing to pull a trigger, for the most part, are not listening to us. Now they're listening because Franklin Graham is going out there. But people of my ilk have been pushed to the side when in circles of the militia. When we've suggested we can do this another way, we can do this another way. Let a tyrant be a tyrant. But when you are the type of person who identifies yourself as militia and you are willing to pull a trigger and you ignore the guidance of the type of people who wrote the Constitution, you're certainly not going to repeat 1776, and you're certainly not going to get anything of a higher caliber.
Well, we certainly have people out there to say 1776 will right again if you take our guns. 1776 will right again if you do this or you do that. And of course, I'm brought into that same fold because of the way I look at things. But I don't believe it's 1776. Like I said, I don't think it's Lexington or Concord. I don't think it's Fort Sumter. It's a whole new game, whole new world. And so we most certainly, it's like the same people who believe that the same protests that they did in the 60s are effective today. They're not. And we can't have someone tell you how to organize a revolution when they don't even have the revelation to decide that the law and the courts and the Constitution are what we need to hold first. And then when all things are exhausted, this is where we move in and say, oh, I guess it's time to stand up. We can't just say, okay, we decide if it's time or not. The American people are going to decide if it's time or not.
Right. I mean, like I said, to answer the question of who gives the order on when we fight, I wouldn't even come close to telling you that I'm somebody that would know when that time is. I'm of the opinion that we're still in a stage of trying to find solutions for this. And one of the solutions that I believe that we can fight back is, yes, the court system is broken, but if you inundate them collectively with lawsuits, over the everyday violations that they encroach on us, and you do it collectively, strategically, and start flooding into the court systems, back into the court systems, that would push this off for a little while. For example, as a political activist, I have warnings in my police jacket that I'm a constitutionalist, that I'm a writer, a journalist. All these other things are in there as if that's something for a police officer to be cautioned about. I've been arrested because of who I am in my hometown, for walking my dog in a public park 10 minutes after curfew, was put in a cage for 3 days and 3 nights with no phone call and no food because I refused to book. Because that's my private property. Now, when I was finally released, because they said no one's ever done that before, no one's ever stood their ground that way before, we don't know what to do with you. And they took me to my arraignment, I demanded a jury trial. And the judge himself, he did not know if there was any legal reason that I should have a jury trial. He just wanted to have a bench trial. And I said, Your Honor, the Seventh Amendment says in any controversy over $20, I'm guaranteed a jury trial. And so they deliberated. About a month later, I got a letter back that said, okay, well, you do get a jury trial. And that was almost 2 years ago, and I've never heard back from state court because they have no idea what to do. Now I'm in a position where I can turn around and file lawsuits against the county and the state myself personally for their infringement. And Jason Patrick, who was arrested at Oregon, also has several lawsuits against Houston County, which is where we're based, and the state, which are still pending because of things like him being illegally detained for their stepping over his constitutional rights.
Right.
He has those lawsuits. So I still think we have that avenue and we have that amount of time before we have to even ask the question, when do we shoot back? There's still time, and I have to believe that because I don't have children personally, but I have nephews and nieces. And I look at them and I go, if we start a hot revolution now, it's going to be passed off to them. And that's just something I can't bear. So I've always said, if there is a way that we can exhaust peacefully to fix this without firing a bullet, we need to do it. We absolutely need to do it because what we start is certainly not going to end with our generation. And that's something I'm very, very passionate about, and that's something my father instilled in me because he was protective of the rights that he passed along to me.
Okay.
So that's where I come from.
Well, Daniel, hold on. We're going to come back to you and the phones that are just blazing tonight. We're going to get to the phones coming up on Ground Zero. Daniel Louis Crumpton here tonight on Ground Zero. It's happened. The standoff continues. They're trying to bring it to a peaceful conclusion. The people there, the four that held out, say that they want to actually lay down their weapons and negotiate with Franklin Graham, Billy Graham's son, and, of course, some other negotiators and the FBI. We're hoping this will come to a peaceful solution. We'll know by morning. 888-673-3700. That's 888-673-3700. We'll be back.
FM News 10.
I'm Clyde Lewis, and this is Ground Zero. We have some breaking news that we want to bring to your attention. It's been reported that Cliven Bundy, the father of Ammon Bundy, just landed in Portland, Oregon a while ago. We're told he has been surrounded by SWAT and has been detained. No further comment, but we did get word that Cliven Bundy, the man who was involved with a standoff of his own in Nevada, the father of Ammon Bundy, was just landed in Portland, Oregon. He was supposed to come to visit his son, and he just landed, and he has been surrounded by SWAT and detained. We don't know if it's at the airport. Details are still fuzzy as we speak, but in the meantime, it seems to be getting more crazy, Daniel, as the night goes on. We're going to go to some calls right now and have people comment. Let's go to Jack in California. Hi, Jack. You're on Ground Zero.
Well, see, what you just reported would only happen in a police state. And what I called tonight about is I was listening to a radio show this morning out of Las Vegas. It was 8:40 a.m. was the station number. And this lady, boy, she just had everything bad to say about these people in Oregon. And she played an interview that was taped by one of the wives of, I believe it was of Bundy that's in jail. And she was saying how they're not being treated very well. It sounded like they're in some kind of isolation, and they're supposed to be let out for 1 hour each day. and she's saying they're only letting them out for 10 to 15 minutes a day.
Well, we requested an interview since we are located just across the street. Our building is located across the street from the Multnomah County Jail. We actually requested an interview. We were denied, and the media, most of the media here who have requested interviews have been denied. So this certainly is something that is very important, and they're holding very close to the vest, and so that's.
Why I'm concerned is because these guys are ranchers, they're cowboys, they're free spirits, and we know that there has been several anti-government types that have been held in custody by the federal government that are held in isolation, and they suffer great psychological damage. And I'm afraid of what they're trying to do is to break their spirits, and that they will be psychologically damaged. And I was wondering, do you guys have any reports about how they're being treated in jail?
We've heard that they've been in isolation. We heard a number of things, but once again, as I've said, and I said before I even decided to jump into this case tonight, is that I wouldn't want to jump into something without knowing exactly what's happening. And believe me, there are a lot of people in the dark as to how they're being treated, what's going on, even the media here. You'd think it was a major story to continue talking about since it's a local, or actually a fairly local area. The last thing I was involved with regards to this is I spoke at a rally for Lavoy Finicum on Saturday at the steps of the Capitol, and that's pretty much all that I've done so far. And then, of course, it was funny because I had said to a colleague of mine, I said, well, that about does it. I think we've wrapped up the entire story with the death of Finicum, a wake or a eulogy for him, and then, of course, a speech. And I said, that's all there is to it. I don't think there's any more to be said. That's why I did the show last night about the Super Bowl. And then today, I wrote a show and produced a show today that was not about this, and had to cut into it. So I'm hoping I can do that show at a later date or maybe tomorrow. But in the meantime, this was something that I hesitated in getting involved with because of the fact that it sounded as if it was going to be something about it just told me that I don't know if I want to jump into this too easily or too quickly because it may just be something that will backfire. But it most certainly has been very interesting and very taxing on many of the staff here.
Well, I can appreciate that, and I find it interesting that we've almost come full circle. In this presidential race, they're referring to the socialist and the billionaire as anti-establishment. And I haven't heard that term since the late 60s.
It seems weird. I mean, things are a lot weirder than they seem, I think. And, I've been thinking that, too. And that's why I was talking about tonight a little bit about how this is as good as this is as good as it may get, because it just seems to me that this experiment, whether it be the American experiment or the human experiment, I think is done. I think that we should, if this is how things are going to go down, if this is how we're going to, I think demonstrate our freedom or fight for freedom or demand that people die because we don't agree with them, this is just bad. I mean, we should root for the American citizen first and foremost. We should also root for jury of our peers, due process, Fifth Amendment, Fourth Amendment rights, but we don't do that anymore. All we care about is when they're going to take our guns away and whether or not we can open up our mouths and say what we think because of freedom of speech. Otherwise, everything else is pretty much said and done when the police kill you where you stand, and that's sad.
Well, what's interesting is the times that we're in, the American people, as individual families, were facing threats from several different directions. A financial crisis, especially in the banking sector, is looming. We face the threat of terrorism, internal revolution, political revolution. It's coming from many different directions.
And World War, you can't forget World War. That's also always hanging over our heads too.
That too, and that's why I emphasize personal protection, because if you remember, and you talk about coming full circle, the Second Amendment is about the Minuteman-style militias. When it opens up with a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, that's what they're talking about, is for small groups and communities to form a local militia for your protection. And not for an offense, but But what would you do, for example, if the grid went down? Wouldn't you have a better chance of surviving if you had a militia as opposed to trying to survive on an individual basis? So from that standpoint, I take issue with your guest, is that we should take advantage of the Second Amendment and think about forming many militias, whether it's through your homeowners association or through your church. It's not for offensive purposes. It's strictly for defensive purposes. And, you know, in some cities they have volunteer firemen. And when you hear the bells, they all run to the fire. And it could be the same way with using your Second Amendment constitutional right to form a militia. We always talk about the right to bear arms and to own arms. We never talk about our right to form a militia. And I think it's time, with all the threats facing us, that you think about getting involved in setting up some kind of local militia.
Daniel, what's your response to that?
He doesn't agree with me at all. I believe in the Second Amendment and the forming of a militia for the exact purpose that he stated, for defense. One of the things that I see is I live in Warner Robins, right by the Air Force Base, and I could throw a rock to some woods across the street where is a tent city of veterans that are homeless. And I'd like the militia that's in my area to, maybe make packed lunches or bring food and clothes to the veterans rather than, spending all their hard-earned money on AR-15 parts for, rallies and stuff like that. I totally agree with the Second Amendment, with a well-regulated militia for the purpose of defense. So your caller doesn't disagree with me at all. We see eye to eye. If it came off that I'm against the militia, not at all. I believe in the Second Amendment very, very strongly for defense.
Jack, I appreciate your call tonight.
All right. Well, I appreciate you talking about this story, because I didn't hear anything in the mainstream media about this. So
you certainly won't, and that's why we are who we are and why we are here. And I thank you for your support, Jack. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's go to a break, and then we'll be back. You're listening to Ground Zero. 888-673-3700. That's 888-673-3700. Online with me, Daniel Louis Crumpton, and Cam, calling from Saskatchewan, Canada. Hi, Cam. You're on Ground Zero.
I called in originally tonight to talk about your original topic, and then this whole thing started to unwind, and you've done a really good job of kind of keeping it all together. It's kind of a historical moment, a pushpin type of moment where you'll be able to look backward and you'll be able to look forward from this and talk about, anyway, with your guests there. It's just ironic where we are right now. My grandparents, my grandfather, he had his firearms, etc. And today, some people would call that a weapons cache. And my grandmother would be a prepper. And how did we get to this point? You mentioned tonight that you're one of the only people covering this. And it'll be interesting to see what sound bites actually are used in the mainstream media from all of this YouTube clippage and everything. What will they choose to show the public, from all of this? The men who your guest earlier talked about the founding fathers, that was a collection of people. There were people who were educated and were able to draft documents like the Constitution and Declaration of Independence. And there were people who stood with George Washington in the snow and were willing to starve and not leave and hold their ground. So tonight you've got four people that believe they're doing the right thing and they're trying to hold their ground. And on the opposite side of that, you got family men and people with wives and kids and, that are law enforcement and they're federal agents. And how did we get to the point where things escalate to this, like this? Like, what would happen if they stood down? What would happen if like I mentioned earlier, my grandfather's rye firearms would now be called a weapons cache because he has more than two of them and more ammunition. Well, you mentioned Cessna airplanes. They got heavy equipment there, machinery.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, no.
No, go ahead.
They've got, heavy. heavy machinery there. There's all this equipment there for 4 people. I mean, what would happen if they just turned and drove away? And those, eventually those people are going to have to leave. They can't stay there forever. But I mean, what would happen if they just de-escalated the thing and they left? And what if they packed up all their stuff and left? And those 4 people could sit there for another month or 2 or whatever, and as long as they're not harming anyone, as long as they're staying within the law, their First Amendment right, Second Amendment right, as long as they're not using their firearms illegally, there's all these laws. You're able to legally own a firearm, but you can't do any harm with it to somebody, but you're entitled to have one. And, 200 years ago, that was encouraged because that's how the country was able to stabilize. So anyway, Clyde, you're really good at observing all this stuff and pulling it together. You mentioned a couple months ago that there might be some event that is amped up or ramped up to be used, I don't want to call this a false flag because I think the people that are there really believe they're doing the right thing, but we live in strange times. You've got embedded people, you've got like agents that are embedded into these cultures of militias and things like that, and how much of this is being manipulated for the benefit of a cause that is an agenda, as you would say, that they're trying to push.
So I would ask the question, when did we go from Barney Fife to stormtroopers? And when did that begin, and why did it begin? And this is where we are now. We had police officers that you could go up to and talk to every day, and they would talk to you. Now there are people who are intimidated by police officers. They really shouldn't be intimidated, but this is where we are now. We seem to have lost. We seem to have lost our ability to. As I said, I was in a documentary, and I said, I think one of the biggest problems are, I think both the police and the people are misunderstanding each other, and that we need to have meetings with them often to find out what their feelings are, whether or not they feel like they're being threatened. And that's the problem, is that we always think about, well, the people are threatened by the police, but what about the police? Do they feel threatened? And if they do feel threatened, what is their biggest threat? And what is it they feel is their biggest threat? And maybe if we were to look at them as human beings and they were to look at us as human beings rather than just, perpetrators, suspects, and people of interest, then maybe we would all understand and know the officers on a name basis. I don't know if that's even possible, but I was always thinking to myself, I lived in a small community, and also I lived in a neighborhood here in Portland where the police officers in our area would show up to our, we'd have something called Night Out. And what it was, we went to a park, we barbecued, we had bands play, I spoke there, I emceed it, and the police officers would show up and they would shake our hands and get to know us. The mayor would show up and find out how we're doing. This was something that I really, really appreciated about my community. And I think that more communities need to have that, but then maybe you can't, because it's already to the point where if an officer was to decide to show up, hold out his hand to somebody, get it cut off. And see, that's the thing, is that we don't want to have that attitude that it's us against the police, it's the police against us. And that is why I think it's important to find ways to negotiate and talk with one another and realize that they're not the enemy. And that if we find out the personalities of some of these police officers, maybe we'll be able to weed out the ones that are bad. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's awesome that you brought that up, because that Mayberry comparison is very appropriate right now, because how did we get to the point where you can't walk across the street and do an interview with somebody because a law was passed where if they're labeled a terrorist, then all of a sudden everything's civil rights and everything are out the window. Everything's out the window, and these people are being held and detained in some back corner somewhere where you can't even go in and talk to them. I mean, I'm not trying to be corny, but in the Mayberry days, you could walk in, stroll in, and talk to the sheriff and do an interview with the guy in the jail cell, possibly. But now, I mean, because of the way things have gotten so wired up, so amped up, the volume's been turned up so high on all of this. You got police and law enforcement and federal agents who have to watch their back the whole time. You've got citizenry, like, tonight you had people call in and say, hey, look, I'm I don't agree with these 4 people. I believe in our rights, and I agree in a militia and things like that. But these people don't stand for me or what I'm trying to say. And then you have you've got all this. It's like this huge melting pot.
Well, all rights now are based on sympathy. If you have their sympathy, you believe they have rights. If you don't, they don't have rights. That's the sad thing, is that rights are equal to everyone. And that is what the Constitution says. And you can't say, well, I have sympathy for this group, so therefore their rights are justified. I don't have sympathy for this group, their rights aren't justified. You can't do this in a country that's supposed to be united. Hey, Cam, I'm out of time. Thank you so much for calling tonight.
I want this to end peacefully, quickly, and I want to be able to return home to my family.
We're just here to help establish some rights and help you guys out. Our family wants to help your family, and that's all we need to do.
The Bundys have been staying in this building since the occupation started. It's guarded by an armed militia member 24 hours a day.
I just want to come out and offer you guys the opportunity to help you get out and get home and resolve this thing peacefully.
We're taking down the surveillance cameras. And
how'd you find out about it?
They reported to us. Trucks came out here and put them up, and it says they're putting up surveillance cameras, and so.
Your federal government! Because they serve the rich and elite class of this earth. Right.
I'm Clyde Lewis. You're listening to Ground Zero. Cliven Bundy is now behind bars. We just got his booking information here at the studio. Apparently, he is on martial hold for the 2014 standoff at his ranch. The FBI was the arresting authority, according to the records. So that's all we got right now on Cliven Bundy's arrest. He was detained at Portland Airport as soon as he landed. He was coming here to see his son. So now he's in the same jail as his son. So, interesting. 888-673-3700. That's 888-673-3700. We have also with us tonight Daniel Louis Crumpton. So, Daniel, here we are, as Jack had said, we are here now hearing about Cliven Bundy being arrested. And he walks off the plane, no sooner touches down on the ground that he has federal authorities come in, arrest him, and throw him behind bars. What do you say to that? Do you think that's kind of odd that they're doing that?
No, not at all. The honeypot worked. Every effort that we had from the Bundy Ranch has now been erased because of this current debacle. But I do want to address something your last caller said, and it's very important. He said, how did we get to this place? And Benjamin Franklin said only a virtuous people are capable of freedom. As nations become corrupt and vicious, they have more need of masters. How did we get to this place? We stopped being a virtuous people. Now, I want to illustrate a solution that I think is very applicable. Where I'm sitting currently is in my office, and behind me is my father's shadow box with his burial flag, and to the left of me is a picture of the signing of the Constitution. In front of me is the Constitution, and to the right of me is a photo of my father in his Navy uniform. Mm-hmm. This is what I stare at every day. And the last time that I was a political prisoner, as I said earlier, I was arrested for walking my dog in a public park 10 minutes after curfew. And it's because I am a political activist.
What would your solution be, Pete?
Well,
Daniel,
they took me to the detention center, they took me to the detention center, I refused to book because it was personal property, and I refused to identify myself because I had not committed a crime. Mm-hmm. And so for 3 days, I did the Gandhi thing and refused food and water. And they did the good cop and the bad cop routine with me for 3 days and 3 nights. Even the warden came and begged me to please book. But here's what I did to get out. On the third day, a young police officer, no more than 22, came into I was in solitary confinement, and he says, can I talk with you a moment? And I said, sure. And he says, I've been hearing from all the other officers about you, that they don't know what to do with you, that you keep asserting your rights, and all of them are afraid to do anything with you. And I'd like to understand why you're doing this. And I explained to him about the Constitution, what the Bill of Rights mean, and how there's no crime with no victim. And he stayed in my cell for 35 minutes. He says, they never taught me any of this in the police academy.
So you're saying, and as I said before, giving revelation before we do revolution. I think a lot of people don't even understand what their rights are, and they don't understand what you're capable of. All they know is grab a gun and run with it. I got to get some phone calls in, Pete, Daniel. So let's go to Pete in Washington. Hi, Pete. You're on Ground Zero.
Evening.
Go ahead. You're on the air.
Well, I've been listening to your show for a long time. I'm kind of a big fan, but I just want to say the reason why those guys are in protective custody, they're high profile. I know I'm very close to people that work down there. Most of the corrections officers are actually pretty conservative. They probably share a lot of these guys' values. They definitely don't agree with the tactics. They have too much respect for law enforcement. They know what these guys do day in and day out. But the reason why they're in protective custody is to protect them from the general population. You have, unimaginable, seriously unimaginable people in the general population, especially downtown. And so, they get medical attention whenever they need it. I mean, dental, everything. I mean, if you want a gender alteration in Multnomah County, the county will pay for it.
Wow, I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
All right, let's hope that none of the Bundys want gender alterations while they're in prison, while they're in jail. That would really suck. But yeah.
they just want these guys to be safe. There's a lot of people down there, they call it gaming, that want to exploit the system. They're documenting false things, to sue the county. The county settles so many things out of court on false allegations. It just gets kind of crazy.
All right.
But seriously, those corrections guys are seriously devoted. I mean, you can have exceptions, but for the most part, they're not bad guys.
Well, I hope they're feeling that what I'm doing is fair. I wouldn't want to offend them. I think that they have a very hard job, and I wouldn't want to second guess them at all. It's just that it's the idea of reporting this information and making sure you're accurate. So if anyone out there who is with the system is listening to my program, which many of them do, I want to just tell you I'm doing my best here. So if there's some things I'm reporting that you feel are erroneous, feel free to call me like Pete did. I think it'd be amazing that we could find out more information and be corrected on things. I'm no authority. I'm just a reporter. So, Pete, I thank you for
to hear that.
What's that?
Speculation that people are being treated poorly, because I know the worst of the worst are not treated poorly down there.
All right. Well, Pete, I thank you for the call. Take care.
You bet.
Bye-bye. Let's go now to Wayne in New Jersey. That's where we are? Wayne in New Jersey. You're on Ground Zero. Go ahead.
Hey, Clyde. How you doing?
Doing great, man.
Love your show.
Thank you.
Look, I usually only get to listen to it while I'm driving home from work, but tonight I had to hang with it quite a bit longer. And first, I want to say my hats are off to the Assemblywoman.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
And what she did there, I just pick up on that as one of the finest examples I've seen in a long time of elected officials carrying out their duty.
I also want to, we should commend the agents involved here. They've used restraint, and they didn't go after these guys. But we'll wait and see what happens in the morning. There may be something that'll come up, but we're hoping that in the morning things will just be as tame as we were led to believe at the end of the whole standoff.
Right, correct. And your guest that you have there, the gentleman from Georgia, I was listening earlier and with his comments, and he said a lot of things that I found really interesting. And my original comment that I wanted to make was kind of more of a real big picture type of thing, looking at what's going on with, in this country with the Patriot movement and, the different organizations and how they were all viewing what was going on there and their take on it. And I got to agree, really to a large extent what this guy was saying is really true, because I'm constantly hearing from a lot of people and a lot of even different, you could almost say rhetoric from organizations saying, everything's keyed on the Second Amendment and our right to bear arms, and the very fact that, we have so many people that own firearms in this country, it's going to protect this country and keep us safe. And that's really not really true, because it takes more than that. I mean, that may be a key, that may be a vital part of it, but as the gentleman said, he was saying, you have all these, and you got a lot of different groups, and some of the organizations are big, some of them are small, and each one, they're patriots, and they, their hearts are in a really good place. And they've all, like you said, they maybe have picked the hill that they're going to die on, but that's not going to get the job done, because if that's all that's going to be done, then, I've heard, and I can't remember what the exact number is that I heard, but I heard somewhere, that the number of people in this country that they know for sure own guns, and I want to say it's close to like 14 million people. But, I mean, if you have 14 million people that pick hills to die on, all you're going to get is 14 million people dying on 14 million different hills. And the opponents, the ones who want to bring about, the kind of change that will take away our rights and our liberty, they're more than willing to see that happen, and that will actually make it easy for them, because there's no unity and common cause to it anymore. Everybody has their own agendas and really too much looking out for themselves. It's not, and basically what it amounts to, you look back at the, when this country was formed and everything, like you said, there was a lot of people involved in what happened there. And there were people who were, armed and willing to fight for the country, but there were also people who, like this gentleman said, were pursuing the other avenues and bringing a lot more to the picture. So, I mean, like, Ben Franklin wasn't considered to be a great fighter and warrior, but he was certainly, instrumental in the forming of our country. I mean, there were diplomats and scholars and people like that, and then, but in the end, what it really boiled down to was leaders. Mm-hmm. And it's what is really lacking, in this whole, the patriotism in our country. What's really lacking is really good leaderships like we had back then.
Well, yeah, you need leaders, and it's true. I think Daniel even brought that up, that we need leaders. But I think that when it comes time to at least demand some sort of accountability from the government, I think that when we see it happen, we'll know how bad it is, and a lot of people will agree. At least we can come to terms with having common ground in that regard. But in the meantime, we're going to have divisive fighting and organized contrarian viewpoints to take power away from people who are fighting just to have, just simple freedoms in their lives. And not saying that, well, just because my sympathy lies with this group, they have rights, and use their agendas to basically push issues in public forums like Super Bowl and places like that. We're seeing all this stuff out of control. Some of this stuff we need to use good judgment. And I'm not saying that one is using better judgment than the other. I just think that sometimes things get out of control, as we heard tonight, the hysteria, and then getting caught up in the power play of it all and realizing, you know what, you're losing your mind. Do you really want to die for this piece of land? Do you really feel that you're being more patriotic? Do you really feel that this is an organized effort to bring attention to this issue? I think there are a lot of things you need to weigh before you start waving guns around and shouting slaves. There's a lot of things we need to consider, as Daniel said. However, we can't, just because they do crazy things and you can't legislate stupid, we can't say that loss of life is justified. And that's the problem I'm having right now. Wayne, thank you for the call, because that just seems to be it. I mean, if you don't like somebody's particular cause and they die while they're fighting that cause, we tend to applaud and cheer. In fact, when they announced that Lavoy Finicum was shot, there were many people who applauded it. I find that very disconcerting. 888-673-3700. We'll be back with more. Don't go away. Looks like we have very little time. This has been a crazy night for everybody. We'd like to thank Brett Recamp for his hard work. Alex Cluton, who is shining. This is his first real immediate gig as a news producer, so he did a great job. Ron Patton, of course, and all he does for this program, getting us, of course, Daniel as a guest tonight. Daniel, and thank you, too, for being on the program. We really appreciate your hard work as well.
Oh, thanks for having me, man. I'm honored every time you have me on.
Well, thank you. And, I'm hoping that, we'll have a lot more cool heads, and that organization and idea and accountability and responsibility are taken into consideration when we decide to take stands like this, because it just seems to me that this was we knew this was going to end up this way we're just hoping it doesn't accelerate any further. But once again, I say that there needs to be reverence for loss of life, and I find it just very disconcerting that Lavoy Finicum died believing what he believed in, and I guess I wouldn't feel so close to it if my uncle didn't know him. A few other farmers that my uncle knew him, saying that he was a stand-up gentleman, a really good man. He was in he was a bishopric in his ward. He was a Mormon, and he just had a lot of, nothing bad was ever said about this man, and it's just unfortunate that it happened like this.
That's right. Clyde, if I can, let me wrap that story up with the young officer. He asked me what it would take for me to go ahead and book out. And I said, you plan to be an officer, for an entire career? He said, yes. I said, you promise me now that when you leave, you'll study that Constitution that you took an oath to. Promise me now. And he gave me his word. I said, and then promise me that you're going to run for sheriff. And he gave me his word. And then we shook hands on it. And then I walked out of that cell. That's how we change a generation. We do it through their hearts and their minds. We have to teach the younger ones who are going into law enforcement and going into the military and going into politics what this country was built on. We do it. We don't have to fire a bullet. We have our republic back in one generation, just one. That's all that it takes.
I believe that what you're saying is true, that if we engender confidence, if we engender trust, faith, solidarity, and accountability, we have nothing to lose. We have everything to gain in this fight that we have. It has nothing to do with guns blazing or anger. It's the idea that if we can find ourselves in a situation where we can utilize those very things, that we can influence and somehow bring about change through influence and good rapport. Everybody loves a great example. Everybody loves to be around someone who beams confidence and beams ideas that change minds. And they don't do it in a coercion, in a form of coercion. They do it with love, sympathy, and tolerance. Daniel, thank you so much for your time tonight. Really appreciate it.
No worries.
Have a good night. Take care.
You too.
That's Ground Zero for tonight. Hey, I hope you don't mind, but I'd like to give a go of that show that I planned on doing tonight, if that's okay with you. I would appreciate it if I could do that again. I wanted to talk about that issue because I think it's important. This just happened to fall into place, and I had to do it because it's the reporter in me and the fact that I know that all of you wanted to hear about it. So if you'd indulge me tomorrow night and let me do the show that I originally wanted to do, and maybe you call, we all have a good time and talk about how we can improve our lives, because it just seems to me, as I said before, the experiment seems to be going awry. I don't know how we can change this, but it's worth talking about. And everything that you tell me, everything that you share, I listen. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for supporting this program. Sometimes it can be very controversial. Sometimes it can be harsh. But most of the time, I hope that you see it as a time to exchange and to learn from one another. Good night from Ground Zero.
FM News 101 KXL.